I invite the member for Wokingham to sign our amendment. So we want to take back control, but we want to take back control with this amendment, and the substance of it on workers' rights and environmental standards and health and safety is itself, for me, one of our red lines, not the only one, but a critical one, back to Parliament. And that's what this amendment does in directing government through that negotiation period. I would recommend it to those around the House also to sign up. The government's got a dilemma. I want to speak directly to government, because at the time when the government is imploring everyone, some, to vote for its deal, it's the time when we have maximum leverage over the government, we across Parliament. And there is a dilemma, and the government's going to need to handle that in a very sophisticated way. The time for rhetoric has gone. There's been plenty of repeat speeches on what people think. Everyone has a view. The time for negotiating has begun. The government ought to be looking, be it the shadow front bench, the shadow Brexit secretary, be it the chair of the Brexit Select Committee, and getting people in, attempting to negotiate directly with them immediately on how we go forward. Because otherwise the prospect of no deal gets all more real. No deal by accident. And the focus has been in here inward, and the government's focus has been inward on its own party and its own DUP deal, rather than outward. And it's getting very, very late in the day, but it's not too late in the day, because the weakness of the government's deal is also its strength, in that it puts a lot off into the negotiations over the trade deal. That gives us in Parliament significant influence if we choose to use it all the way through. And Mr. Speaker, your ruling yesterday has been seen in the context of Brexit, and you've been biased in relation to Brexit. Nonsense. You'll have whatever view you want. The significance for government must not be lost in this. It's hugely significant, because with a Fixed-Term Parliament Act and a minority government, what Mr. Speaker's ruling does into the future is give Parliament more power over a minority government. Happens to be your minority government now. This is an election. It could be our minority government. The same principle. This is absolutely fundamental, because it changes the way we will have to operate. But will we learn quickly enough? Or will we just continue with the rhetoric and fall into something that actually the majority do not want? I mean, there are other red lines. These aren't the only ones. Things we, I think, on this side would regard, I speak personally anyway, absolutely essential. Now, one of the reasons my constituents voted Brexit, it was no surprise to me, was because we've not had our fair share. We've not had our fair share. There's a small period under the Blair government when infrastructure-wise we did get our fair share. And we gloried in it, and it was brilliant. But other than that, we have not in my lifetime had our fair share. Whoever's in government, to be honest, in the next 5 years, has to give what I call the real Brexit dividend. It's into areas like mine, our fair share, which means other areas would get less. That is what left behind actually means. And I just recall the demonstration I went on outside the power stations, 5,000 workers. I was the only external person invited. I spoke to it, demanding the jobs that were going to Portuguese workers because of EU laws. They could do nothing about it. We had to go and pressure the employer. Then we succeeded in that, to civil action. But I realised at that point how strong the feeling was, and therefore that result was no surprise. And if you want to define a Brexit voter in my area, it is a trade unionist in an organised workplace. That's the core of the Brexit vote, and my area is not unusual in relation to that. Government needs to get its head round that in terms of negotiating with opposition over the next weekend, the next few weeks, perhaps, if that's needed, to get a deal. Because I stood on a manifesto, and that manifesto said, we're going to deliver Brexit. Now, frankly, voters can boot me out, boot any of us out for reneging, whatever, or sticking to our principles. And I don't for a moment demur from those who take a totally opposite point of view, very principled people. I respect them for that. I don't agree on their conclusions, but I respect them absolutely for their bravery in that. But everyone knows, even with the second referendum, that will not resolve the split in the country. Part of what we need to do in this process in relation to this deal is resolve that split in the country. My area is sick to death of condescending, patronising words. People in my area knew what they were voting for. They knew why they were voting. And by the way, it's not the same as what the member for Wokingham and his vision is. They were not voting for a race to the bottom, for the lowest common denominator, for lower wages, lower standards, for us to undercut the rest. What they were voting for was best practice, high standards, to compete with the freedoms there for the highest of standards. And my appeal to my colleagues and others in other parties, now is the time for practical, specific proposals of what people, no, I won't give way, what people are in favour of precisely. Not what people are against, but precisely what people are in favour of. Because it's not just, will we get through the next few weeks? It's actually about whether Parliament and its authority will survive. My voters will walk. They may not vote Tory, they may not vote UKIP, they may not vote for me, they will walk. They'll say the political process is useless, it's broken. You're all to blame. Now, we can have different conclusions on the outcomes for that, but understanding that reality is fundamental. We should at least try, from the Labour Party manifesto position and our stated objectives, to be getting a negotiated deal with government and vice versa. It's fundamental to that process. Will it succeed? I don't know. We are helping with this, and we're helping not to be helpful politically. We are helping because this is real stuff. Health and safety, environmental standards, workers' rights is real stuff. I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
Grateful, because I actually agree with him about how the public will react if their voice is ignored. But would he withdraw his comment that I want lower standards and a race to the bottom? I want higher pay, better standards, and that's what I campaign for.
Well, I shall finish by inviting the honourable gentleman, as well as everybody else, to sign our amendment. We should see more amendments like this on equality issues, on other red lines, and get the deal through by the maximum consensus based on the manifesto commitments we have, but more importantly, holding the country together.